It may surprise you, but the NFC South is actually looking good this year. Going into the year, almost everyone thought it was going to be one of the worst divisions in the NFL. However, currently they are one of only 2 divisions with 3 2-0 teams. In today's video, I will break down each team in the division, go over how their wins looked, how the team has actually performed, and try and decide if each team is a fraud or not. To start it off, the Atlanta Falcons, they're currently at the top of the division since they had 2 division wins. Their first win was against the Carolina Panthers, and the game was closer than it looks. It did end up being 24-10, so you go, oh, it's a 2-touchdown lead, but going into the fourth quarter, it was actually tied. The Falcons did quickly score in the fourth quarter and change that, but it is worth saying that this was not a blowout. And if you haven't paid attention to any Falcons games over the past year, this was a classic one with 26 rushes and only 18 passes. Arthur Smith, the coach of the Falcons, loves to run the ball, and he doesn't care what you say. But it's hard to argue with him when they're 2-0 right now. He does have a pretty good reason with Desmond Ridder being his quarterback, and Ridder was pretty shaky, especially in Game 1. The Falcons' offensive line struggled with the Panthers' defensive line, and he was sacked 4 times. However, when he was able to get the ball out, he was pretty efficient, but as to be expected, he didn't throw for a lot of yards and only had 115 passing yards. The rushing game, on the other hand, was electric, with Tyler Algier getting a majority of the carries with 15 rushes for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then the electric running back behind him, Bijan, getting 10 carries for 56 yards. So if you can get 5 yards per rush, why would you ever pass? And when you run all the time, you do really wear a team down because your offensive line is just constantly mauling over their defensive line, and it will help you out in the fourth quarter, as you could see in this game. And on the other side of the ball, their defense was very stout, getting 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery, giving Bryce Young a terrible first game with a 16.5 QBR. Then in week 2 versus the Packers, the Falcons fell behind once again and came back in the fourth quarter. And looking at the score, the Packers game looked really close. However, it was not. The Falcons absolutely dominated the Packers. However, they just couldn't finish drives. They couldn't score touchdowns. They ended up with 4 field goals, and their longest field goal was 39 yards. However, while their offense was struggling to score touchdowns, their defense was keeping them in it. They almost kept the Packers under 200 total yards of offense. And while the Falcons defense didn't have a lot of sacks or cause any turnovers in this game, keeping a team almost under 200 yards is quite the feat. They did have the issue of allowing 3 touchdowns in this game, which let the Packers get ahead. But if you can keep the other team's offense off the field this much, it is quite the accomplishment. And the Falcons' offense in this game didn't let the defense down either because, well, as I said earlier, they couldn't score. They did manage to stay on the field for a long time. They ended up with 45 rushing attempts and 32 passes. So once again, more rushes than passes, of course. And their rushes, a little less efficient this time, only got 211 yards on 45 attempts. So about 4.7 yards per attempt. And since they were down in this game, Ridder had to throw the ball a lot more, almost doubling his pass attempts, and he did have some decent plays. However, I would say if the Falcons want to win, they just need to keep on doing what they're doing and run the ball and play good defense. In my opinion, the Falcons will end up being a pretty good team. However, I think they're going to have a major weakness against teams with good quarterbacks. Quarterbacks such as Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, any of those elite quarterbacks. And I know you might be thinking, duh, they're bad against good quarterbacks. Everybody is. But I think the Falcons will be worse than normal because they rely so much on their running game. If a good offense comes in and scores a bunch of points, the Falcons are just going to fall apart and potentially get blown out. However, there aren't that many great offenses in the league, so I think they'll end up with about 10 wins this year and make the playoffs. I don't know whether they'll win or not because I think the division does have some competition. Next up, we have the Saints, also 2-0. And in my opinion, they had the most impressive win out of the 4 teams, and that was their first win over the Tennessee Titans. Going into the year, the Titans didn't look that good, but the Titans always end up being a solid team, and the rest of the teams that everybody's played has not been that good. So anyways, they have been kind of the opposite of the Falcons, and that is that they have never been down in the fourth quarter through the first 2 games. So instead of having to come back, they just have to hold on to their leads. The Saints have had a bit more of a traditional offense when compared to the Falcons, with Derek Carr, the new addition, looking like Derek Carr pretty much. He's averaged about 250 yards per game, but he only has 1 touchdown, so for fantasy, he's killing you. But as far as an actual quarterback, he has survived. He has only really targeted his main weapon of Chris Olave, who is an elite wide receiver in his 2nd year in the NFL. And so far this year, he has averaged about 100 yards per game. And then as far as the rushing game goes, it's really a huge mixed bag because Kamara has still been suspended. They had a rookie that has been injured, and it's just kind of been all random. However, they always do have the surprise attack of Taysom Hill, who is surprisingly effective for some reason. And a fun fact is Taysom Hill actually has more rushing yards so far than the Minnesota Vikings team. But it's only 79 yards, so it's not that impressive. But the reason why the Saints have been winning is their dominant defense. In week 1, they held the Tennessee Titans to 15 points. And then in week 2, they held the Panthers to 17, and this involved a touchdown in garbage time. So far, the Saints are 4th in the league in points allowed with 32 total points. So if they didn't have that garbage time touchdown, they'd probably be in 1st. And while they are giving up a few more yards than the Falcons, only like 300 yards per game, so still very good, they have been pretty disruptive with turnovers and sacks. Through 2 games, the Saints have caused 4 turnovers, and they also have 7 sacks. So as far as an outlook on the Saints goes, they have a lot of potential. They have Derek Carr, who could turn into the best quarterback in the division, or he could continue to be average. They have Kamara coming back. They have Olave, who's young and continuously getting better, and they might have the best defense in the division. And the combination of a quarterback who used to be an MVP candidate a long time ago, and a great defense and a great wide receiver could easily lead them to win the division. However, they do have one big problem, and that's that their offensive line has not been great. Derek Carr has been sacked 4 times in each of these 2 games. So while they do have a lot of potential, I believe their offensive line and Derek Carr just getting sacked is a big enough weakness that I don't think they're going to win the division. They might get the 2nd or 3rd wild card spot, but I have a different team as the favorite to win the division. But, of course, with these elite talents, I wouldn't blame you for picking them. Next up is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, also 2-0. So to start the year off, they beat the Minnesota Vikings 20-17, and then they beat the Bears, probably the worst team in the NFL, but they beat them 27-17. The Buccaneers also, you'll see a theme in this division, have a very good defense. However, they have allowed a few more points throughout the year, but they have played the Vikings, who have Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the NFL. So I'm okay with spotting them the 2 points and saying, hey, your defense is just as good as the Saints, because the Saints haven't played anyone nearly as talented as the Vikings offense. And then the Buccaneers also have a actually decent offense. Going into the year, everyone thought this team was going to suck. So Baker Mayfield, originally he wasn't even thought to be the starter, so he ended up winning the job, and I hope it works out for him because I love his commercials, and I feel bad about what the Browns did to him on the way out. And through 2 games, Baker Mayfield has looked pretty good. He has thrown for about 500 yards, has 3 touchdowns, and no turnovers. And he has really utilized his weapons that the Bucs have that you forgot about last year because Tom Brady and everybody just looked so bad. But he has utilized Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to the fullest, especially Mike Evans. And you'll know this if you have him on your fantasy team. But he has been very good. And if you're saying, hey, the Buccaneers haven't been scoring a ton of points, That's true, but they also haven't had to because their defense has been so good. On the defensive side of the ball, the Buccaneers have been able to get 5 turnovers through 2 games. Of course, as I just said, they were able to keep the powerful Vikings offense to just 17 points. And they have 8 sacks so far. Now, 6 were against the Bears and 2 against the Vikings. So, you might say, hey, you're not going to play a team as bad as the Bears every day, so those 6 are a bit exaggerated, and I'd have to probably agree with you. However, looking forward, I could easily see the Buccaneers winning the division, but they have a huge test this week playing the Eagles. But if they look okay or even win the game, I could easily see the Buccaneers putting it all together, Baker Mayfield looking good with his very good wide receiver weapons, the defense looking great. They could easily put it together if they can just win some divisional games against the Falcons, the Bucs, and the Panthers, which, shouldn't be that hard against the Panthers. And if I had to guess at this point, I would pick the Buccaneers for the winner of the NFC South. Now, it is a tight division with a world of unknowns, so if they fell apart, I also wouldn't be shocked. But if I had to put money on one team to win the division, this is my team, because currently they have the best quarterback in the division, with Baker Mayfield playing like a legitimate top half of the NFL quarterback. Don't worry, I'm not getting crazy. I'm not saying he's top 10 or anything like that, but the rest of the division's quarterbacks are not either, with Derek Carr being the second best quarterback at around, 20th best quarterback in the NFL. So it's not a lot of competition, but I believe the strong defense, the strong wide receivers, and the best quarterback in the division will help them win the division. However, not everyone agrees with me with this, because if you look at the overall rankings, which combines ESPN, NFL, USA, a bunch of other ones, you'll see that the Tampa Bay Bucks average out to be 17th in the NFL in the power rankings, and then the Saints and the Falcons are 10 and 11. So just no respect to the Bucs, but I believe in them right now. And then if you go, hey, there's one more team in the division, don't worry, I didn't forget about the Panthers. They are way at the bottom of these rankings at number 29, and they have looked pretty bad. So the Panthers offense has just not been able to score. They have 27 points, not in one game, in both games. Bryce Young he's had a rough time. So I don't entirely blame him. One, because he's rookie, he's brand new to the NFL. They don't have a good offensive line. They don't have good wide receivers at all, especially since they traded DJ Moore. And they played good defenses in the Falcons and the Saints. So he's really just getting beat up. And even more so since he's going to miss this week with an ankle injury. And he's just so small, I don't know how he's going to deal with it. The one upside for the Panthers is their defense has looked legitimate. And they have gotten 4 sacks in each of the first 2 games, which if you keep that pace for the entire year, you end up with 68 sacks, which would probably lead the league in sacks. So while the defense is good, the offense just puts them in such a bad spot, with the offense being pitiful, that they just end up letting points score. So if I'm talking about who's real, who's fake, the Panthers are real, they're just real bad. So anyways, I hope you liked the video. Leave a comment on your thoughts, like, subscribe, and I'll see you later.